responsible body, slower paced and famously deliberative. In 1831, Alexis de Tocqueville praised the American Senate, writing,
The Senate is composed of eloquent advocates, distinguished generals, wise magistrates, and statesmen of note, whose arguments will do honor to the most remarkable parliamentary debates of Europe.
in theory, this is one heck of a system. Responsive and responsible, powerful yet accountable. In theory. But in practice, it's proven, let's say, less lofty. Those Senate debates the Tocqueville praised established a standard for democratic deliberation, but it's worth remembering that the substance of those debates was the expansion of slavery and the nullification of federal power. In theory, Democrats William Thurman broke the record for the longest filibuster. He took more than 24 hours straight to block the 1957 Civil Rights Act. This history calls to mind less of Tocqueville's soaring praise and more of the quip attributed to President Teddy Roosevelt.
When they called the roll in the Senate, the senators did not know whether to answer present or not guilty.
Still, I'm enamored of rules that force the majority to slow down, to listen, and to consider the other side. I want to hold on to the possibility of how Huey Long used the filibuster in the 1930s, including his 15-hour filibuster that blocked an anemic version of Social Security and helped ensure a more progressive and far-reaching version. I want to imagine the filibuster as Jimmy Stewart in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
Bleary-eyed, voice gone, he can't go on much longer, and all official Washington is here to be in on the kill. That's all I ask. Get up there with that lady that's up on top of this Capitol dome, that lady that stands for liberty. Take a look at this country through her eyes if you really want to see something. And you won't just see scenery. You'll see the whole parade of what man's carved out for himself after centuries of fighting. Fighting for something better than just jungle law. Fighting so he can stand on his own 2 feet, free and decent, like he was created, no matter what his race, color, or creed.
But of course, that speech, it isn't real. It's a Frank Capra film. And recent Senate filibusters have sounded less like Jimmy Stewart and more like Ted Cruz in 2013, trying to overturn the Affordable Care Act.
Do you like green eggs and ham? I do not like them, Sam I am. I do not like green eggs and ham. Would you like them here or there? I would not like them here or there. I would not like them anywhere. I do not like green eggs and ham. I do not like them, Sam I am.
That was the kind of scene that led the late Senator Bob Dole to suggest, if you're hanging around with nothing to do and the zoo's closed, come on over to the Senate to get the same kind of feeling and you won't have to pay. I'm Melissa Harris Perry, and we begin today's takeaway asking whether it's time to change the rules of the game in the U.S. Senate. Sahil Kapoor is Senior National Correspondent at NBC News. It's always great to have you with us, Sahil.
Great to be back, Melissa.
Okay, so last week, President Biden reluctantly and belatedly called for reform of the Senate filibuster and really tied it to this passage of voting rights legislation. So is it enough, or is this maybe too little too late?
It is unlikely to be enough. The Senate is going to debate 2 major pieces of voting rights legislation this week, the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. Now, both of them have a majority support in the Senate to pass if they were to come up for a vote on the merits, an up or down vote. But they don't have the support needed to overcome the 60-vote rule of the filibuster, nor do they have the 50 Democrats needed to change the rules, to create an exception to the filibuster the way there are exceptions for other issues, and bring these bills to a vote. As a result, they are stuck. President President Biden and Democratic leaders face two immovable objects named Senator Joe Manchin and Senator Kirsten Sinema. And it seems that all the pressure over the last year from President Biden, from Democratic leaders, from fellow colleagues, from activists, from civil rights leaders has not made an impression on them to make an exception for the filibuster for voting rights.
All right, so I want to talk about that and presume for a moment that Senator Sinema, perhaps in particular, is being honest in her concern that the filibuster is this critical tool of democracy, and her concern that in fact Democrats may, in a fairly short order, themselves want to have use of the filibuster. So let's just take a listen to her for a moment.
Eliminating the 60-vote threshold will simply guarantee that we lose a critical tool that we need to safeguard our democracy from threats in the years to come.
So, Ms. Sahil, do you buy that?
That really depends on your perspective. You can look at this a number of different ways. The Sinema view is that the 60 vote threshold promotes stability in lawmaking, and she said this repeatedly, including last summer and spring when reporters like me pushed her office to explain her view on the filibuster. And she argued that if Democrats create an exception now for voting rights, then in a couple of years, Republicans could use that same exception to, for instance, enact nationwide voter ID and repeal everything Democrats do. Now, many of her colleagues don't buy it, I'll tell you that. They believe that this is a unique moment, an exceptional moment where Democrats have to use the tools necessary to combat former President Trump's big lie of a stolen election and all the results of it, which include restrictive voting laws across the country, as well as potential attempts at election subversion, which the Freedom to Vote Act gets at. Some of Sinema's colleagues have also argued that if Republicans have the trifecta down the road and they really want to eliminate the filibuster, they would do it anyway, that they don't need Democrats to do it first. And that's where the majority of the Senate Democratic caucus is, but a majority of the caucus is not enough. They need all 50 votes. They have a path to getting 48 to eliminate or create an exception to the filibuster, but Sinema controls her own vote, and she is not being swayed.
Okay. Now, unlike the bicameral legislature that I was talking about, the filibuster isn't in the Constitution. So help me understand why Senator Sinema and others perceive it as so critical to sort of preserving the capacity of democracy to move forward.
Firstly, you're correct. It's not in the Constitution. The filibuster is not in the original design of the Senate either. It has a fascinating bit of history. I won't go into the whole thing, but basically it came about by way of historical accident, according to historians who have looked at this. In the early 1800s, after the famous duel between Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr, Burr suggested a bunch of changes to Senate rules that they took up without knowing that it cut off their ability to end debate. And it was only generations later, in the mid-1800s, that the filibuster was even used, and it has evolved along the way from being a unanimous 100 votes to end debate to 67 votes, 2/3 of the Senate, and now it is 60. Now, what does Sinema say about the filibuster? Her view, again, is that it promotes stability in lawmaking and it prevents wild swings from left-wing policymaking to right-wing policymaking, which is what she fears. Of course, the Senate is not the only impediment to making legislation. You also have to pass something through the House of Representatives. You also have to have the president sign it. So there would be other checks to governance if the filibuster wasn't there. But her view is that she likes the 60-vote threshold because it pushes policy to a centrist place.
In my romantic appreciation for the filibuster, it is always a filibuster that causes debate. It's always, again, that sort of Jimmy Stewart, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Frank Capra version of the filibuster, where we get to hear an impassioned debate that is presumably the way that the Senate is supposed to hold up this, cross-partisanship that Manchin wants, and this sort of responsible, long vision that Sinema wants. So when you say that this week, beginning today, we're going to hear debate from the U.S. Senate about voting rights, are we going to actually hear debate? Or is this something that's going to simply be Democrats making the case and Republicans remaining silent?
Well, when the Senate says it's debating something, I usually use the word debate in quotes because nobody's convincing anybody. Everyone knows exactly how they're going to vote. And we know exactly what the votes are going to be on these two bills, unless there's something extremely surprising. The Freedom to Vote Act would break 50-50. If it's an up or down vote, then Vice President Kamala Harris would have to tiebreaker. And the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act has 51 votes. That'll break 51 to 49 with all Democrats and the vote of Republican Lisa Murkowski. So the Senate has figured out a path to actually bring these two bills up for consideration and discuss them on the Senate floor. That was through a so-called message from the House of Representatives where they passed the bills, they sent it over to the Senate, and it's privileged in a way that you don't need the first 60 vote hurdle to begin debate. They can do that. They hope to start doing that as early as today. And so what happens next? They can begin debate on the Senate floor with 51 votes, but they need 60 to end debate. That's where the filibuster remains. That's where there's no loophole around the filibuster. And Senator Chuck Schumer, the majority leader, a New York Democrat, has said he will call a vote on a rules change if and when the Republicans filibuster those two voting bills. That's when all Democrats are likely to have to go on the record if he follows through with that promise and cast their votes and say where they are.
Sahil Kapoor is senior national political reporter at NBC News. Thank you for joining us today.
Great to be back.
All right, and later in the hour, we're going to be talking with a member from the other part of our bicameral legislature, the House of Representatives. I'm having a conversation with Representative Ayanna Pressley from Massachusetts. We're going to talk about gridlock in D.C. and what she's looking at in the political world today. Stay tuned for that talk later in the show. Stay with us here on The Takeaway. The Takeaway is supported by Indeed with Instant Match, a hiring tool instantly delivering to businesses a list of candidates whose resume on Indeed match the job description. Learn more at Indeed.com/credit.
And by BetterHelp Online Counseling. BetterHelp, connecting people with a therapist in a private online environment for issues like depression, anxiety, and relationships. 17,000 therapists are available through BetterHelp using a computer or smartphone. Learn more at BetterHelp.com/public.
Supporting WHYY Trenton Area Soup Kitchen. This month is having its 40th anniversary, feeding people in the Trenton area and offering programs to improve quality of life. During the pandemic, Task has served more than 750,000 meals. TrentonSoupKitchen.org. And Atlantic City Electric, making the energy grid smarter, stronger, and cleaner, and adding new infrastructure, trimming trees, installing stronger poles, aerial cables, and building new equipment underground. AtlanticCityElectric.com/grid. This is The Takeaway with Melissa Harris Perry from WNYC and PRX in collaboration with WGBH Radio in Boston.
Earlier this month, 17 people, including 8 children, were killed in the Bronx when a sudden fire spread through an apartment building. New York City officials have pointed to a space heater and faulty self-closing doors as the cause of the blaze. The city's Office of the Chief Medical Examiner has ruled that each of the deaths were an accident.